"Mom, stay out of my life. I'm an adult. And I don't want to see you anymore." My daughter said those words to my face. Not in anger. Not during a fight. She said them calmly, as if she had rehearsed them. As if she had already made peace with losing me. I remember the way the kitchen clock kept ticking behind her, loud and steady. I remember holding the same chipped mug I had used every morning for years, suddenly unsure where to put my hands. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She didn't look back. She simply picked up her bag and walked out of my life. Exactly 1 year later, my doorbell rang at dusk. When I opened the door, I barely recognized her. No car in the driveway. No phone in her hand. Just one suitcase and eyes that wouldn't meet mine. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. "Mom, I have nowhere to go. Please." The hallway smelled faintly of lavender cleaner. The porch light flickered. And in that quiet space between us, one question pressed against my chest, slow and unbearable. How do you cut your own mother out of your life, and then come back begging when everything falls apart? If you want to hear my story until the end, please subscribe to the channel and tell me which city you're listening from. I want to see how far this story travels. My name is Helen. I am 63 years old, and for most of my life things were quiet, ordinary, and predictable. I lived in the same modest house for over 3 decades. I worked, paid my bills on time, planted flowers every spring, and drank my coffee from the same chipped mug every morning, the handle warm in my palm. I was never a perfect mother. I know that now, and I knew it then. I lost my patience sometimes. I worried too much. I asked questions that probably felt unnecessary, but I was always there. Always reachable. Always steady. The kind of mother who stayed even when it was inconvenient, even when it hurt. Lauren is my only child. I raised her alone after her father left when she was 9. There was no dramatic goodbye, just an empty closet and silence where his voice used to be. From that moment on, it was the two of us. I learned how to be strong quietly, how to stretch a paycheck, how to show up to school meetings with a calm face, even when I was exhausted. I taught Lauren to be independent because I had to be. I taught her to speak up, to finish what she started, to never rely completely on anyone else. At least that is what I believed I was teaching her. I wanted her to have choices. I wanted her to feel capable. I wanted her to need me less, not because I didn't love her, but because I loved her enough to let her grow. For a long time it felt like I had done something right. She did well in school. She moved into her own apartment. She laughed easily. She called me on Sundays. Sometimes she would ask my opinion, sometimes she wouldn't, and that felt normal. That felt healthy. I was learning how to step back without disappearing. I remember thinking more than once that this must be what success looks like for a mother. A daughter who doesn't cling, who doesn't fall apart, who doesn't depend too heavily on anyone. I didn't know then that independence can look very similar to distance when someone else begins to whisper into your ear. At 63, I understand something I didn't understand when Lauren was younger. Love does not protect you from being replaced. Time together does not guarantee loyalty. And being a good mother does not mean your place in your child's life is permanent. Back then, though, my life still felt intact. My routines held. My house was full of familiar sounds. And I had no idea how quietly everything was about to change. The first time I met Ethan, nothing dramatic happened. No raised voices. No arguments. No obvious reason to worry. And that was exactly what made it dangerous. Real trouble rarely announces itself. It usually arrives politely, smiling, and sits down at your table like it belongs there. He shook my hand, firm but brief, his grip confident in a way that felt rehearsed. He kept one arm around Lauren's waist as if to remind everyone in the room that she was already claimed. I noticed it immediately, the way his fingers rested just a second too long at the small of her back. I said nothing. Mothers learn early that saying the wrong thing can close doors forever. We sat in my kitchen, the same narrow room where Lauren had once practiced spelling words and cried over broken crayons. I poured coffee into my old mugs. Ethan declined sugar before I even offered, correcting me with a soft smile when my hand hovered near the bowl. Lauren laughed lightly, brushing it off as nothing. "You still remember every little thing about her," he said to me. Then, just as casually, "She doesn't really need that anymore." I smiled back, polite, careful. Inside something shifted. Not pain. Not anger. Just a quiet awareness that the ground had moved slightly beneath my feet. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself this was what it looked like when a child built a life that no longer centered around her mother. Still, that tightness stayed with me long after they left, lingering while I rinsed the cups and dried them slowly, one by one. A few weeks later, we had dinner together again. I mentioned gently that Lauren might want to read contracts carefully before signing them. She had been doing freelance work, nothing unusual, but paperwork matters. Ethan leaned back in his chair, relaxed, confident, and smiled as if I were a well-meaning child. "You shouldn't listen to your mom so much," he said, right in front of me. "She's from another generation." Lauren smiled. She said nothing. That silence was small, almost invisible, but it followed me home. It echoed later that night while I stood alone at the sink, hot water running over my hands, the skin turning red without me noticing. After that, the changes came quietly. Lauren stopped calling on Sundays. When she did call, her voice sounded rushed, distracted, as if she were already halfway somewhere else. Our conversations thinned, becoming short exchanges instead of shared moments. "How are you?" I asked. "Fine. How's work?" "Busy." "How's Ethan?" "Mom, relax." I told myself to respect her space. I told myself not to interfere. I reminded myself that she was an adult, entitled to her own choices and her own mistakes. But stepping back felt less like giving space and more like being gently erased. The last time I tried to talk to her honestly, we were standing beside her car. I suggested she keep a small savings account in her own name just in case. My voice was calm, practical, loving. She sighed, sharp and impatient. "Mom, you're overthinking everything." For the first time, I saw irritation where trust used to be. I didn't argue. I didn't push. I went home, folded laundry, and told myself this was normal, that this was what letting go felt like. But deep down I knew the truth. This wasn't independence. This was distance being carefully taught. And I was already disappearing from her life, one quiet moment at a time. The phone calls became rare, and when they did come, they arrived like quick taps instead of knocks. Lauren would speak while walking, breath moving in the background, car doors closing, Ethan's voice somewhere behind her. I learned to keep my questions simple so I wouldn't sound like a problem she had to manage. I started hearing about her life the way strangers do, through pictures and captions. A new couch, a weekend trip, a ring of fairy lights in a rented cabin. In every photo, Ethan was slightly forward, chin lifted, one arm looped around her as if he were holding a trophy. Lauren's smile looked bright, but it didn't reach her eyes the way it used to. The first time I asked why she hadn't mentioned the trip, she paused too long. "Oh, it was last minute," she said. "We were busy." Busy. That word became a wall. It didn't explain anything, but it ended everything. Visits changed too. She stopped coming inside and would stand on the porch with her keys in hand, shifting her weight as if her own mother's house had become a waiting room. When she did sit at my table, she kept her phone face down like it was listening. If it buzzed, she reached for it immediately, eyes dropping, attention leaving. Once I suggested we have lunch, just the two of us. Her expression tightened, almost polite. "Ethan doesn't like to be excluded," she said, as if that settled it. I stared at her, surprised by how normal she made it sound, and swallowed the reply that rose in my throat. Holidays were the sharpest. On Thanksgiving, I set 2 places out of habit, then tried to laugh at myself and packed one set of cutlery back into the drawer. Lauren texted me late that afternoon. "We're doing something with friends. Love you." No call. No photo. Just those 4 words, like a receipt you crumple and toss. At Christmas, I mailed her a small box, framed photo of her at 12 with her front teeth missing, and a card written in my neat, careful handwriting. She posted the box online the next day. Not the photo, not the card. Just the packaging, the caption. "Mom still thinks I'm her baby," face with tears of joy. I read it twice, folded my hands in my lap, and breathed slowly alone. I tried to keep my dignity. I kept my voice gentle. I asked about her work, her plans, the little things, but I noticed the pattern. Anything that belonged to her alone was shrinking. "We decided. We're thinking. We don't really do that." The word "I" disappeared. Then there were the little practical changes, small enough to ignore if you wanted to. She stopped paying her own phone bill. She joked that it was easier if Ethan handled it. She mentioned he'd put her car insurance under their account. She sounded proud, as if merging everything proved they were serious. I asked softly if she still had her own emergency savings. She laughed once, short and dismissive. "Mom, you're so dramatic," she said. "We're married, not roommates." Married. The word landed like a stamp. I hadn't been invited to a big wedding. There was no family gathering, no dress, no photographs on my mantle. There had been a courthouse, she told me afterward, quick and light, like mentioning a grocery run. Ethan had planned it. It had felt simple. She had sounded pleased, and I had forced my smile to match hers. I remember standing by my hallway mirror after that call, adjusting my scarf as if I were going somewhere, then realizing there was nowhere to go. I was her mother, and I had found out about her marriage after the paperwork was already filed. After that, my opinions became inconveniences. If I offered advice, Lauren's eyes would glaze and she'd glance at her phone. If I asked a question, she'd sigh. "Mom, don't interfere," she said one afternoon when I reminded her to read Elise carefully. "I'm an adult." The sentence was clean and sharp. Adult. As if I had been speaking to her like a child. As if my concern was an insult. Ethan's influence showed up in the language she used. She started calling my worries negative energy. She started saying things like, "We don't need outside voices." Once, when I asked if she was happy, she smiled too quickly and said, "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" The answer sounded rehearsed, like something she had been told to memorize. I nodded. I let things pass. I watched her drive away and listened to the hum of my refrigerator in the quiet house, the same steady sound I used to hear when she was little and safe in her room. That night I opened my calendar and circled the date of her next birthday, then stared at the empty square beside it where I used to write Lauren calls. I didn't write anything. I just closed the book and held my chipped mug with both hands until the warmth faded. I told myself this was a season, that she would come back around. But a mother can feel when a door is being built, board by board, between her and her child. And the worst part was this. Lauren didn't seem to notice the door at all. A year can pass the way dusk gathers, quietly layer by layer, until you look up and realize the light has changed. After Lauren told me to stay out of her life, I tried to obey her exactly. I didn't call. I didn't check in. I didn't send articles about warning signs or money or control, even when my fingers itched to. I practiced a new kind of motherhood, the kind that loves from a distance and keeps its hands folded. I marked her birthday on my calendar anyway. I mailed a card with a simple message, no advice, no questions. Just, "I'm proud of you. I'm here." The card was never mentioned. The silence that followed felt deliberate, as if she were proving a point. "See? I can live without you." Spring came. Then summer. I learned to stop expecting her name on my phone screen. I learned to sleep without the small worry that used to sit beside my pillow like a house cat. Some evenings I would stand at my kitchen window and watch the streetlights blink on, one after another, and tell myself this is what she wanted. This is what adults do. They choose their lives. But on the inside, my love didn't shrink. It just had nowhere to go. The day it happened was a Tuesday, late September, the kind of day that smelled like damp leaves and clean laundry. I had just taken my scarf off and hung it by the door. The house was quiet except for the refrigerator's hum and the soft ticking of the clock above the stove. I remember it because the ticking seemed louder than usual, like it wanted my attention. Then the doorbell rang. First I thought it was a delivery. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked to the entryway, my slippers whispering on the floor. The porch light flickered when I opened the door, and cold air slid into the hall. Lauren stood there. No car at the curb. No phone in her hand. Her hair was pulled back in a hurried knot, and her face looked thinner, the skin around her eyes bruised with exhaustion. Beside her was a single suitcase, scuffed at the corners like it had been dragged. For a moment we only stared at each other. I could see her throat move as she swallowed. I could see her hands trembling on the suitcase handle, trying to steady herself. "Mom," she whispered as if the word cost her. I have nowhere to go." Her voice cracked on the last word. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she didn't bother wiping them away. She looked past me into the warm hallway like a person looking at shelter in a storm. I didn't step aside right away. Not because I wanted to punish her. Because my body needed a second to understand what my heart already knew. The year had ended and the story had come back to my door. "Where's Ethan?" I asked quietly. Her eyes dropped. "Gone," she said. "Everything is gone." A gust of wind pushed dead leaves across my porch. The suitcase rocked slightly then went still. I held the door with one hand, the other pressed against the edge of my chipped mug-shaped key dish on the table behind me, as if I needed something solid to keep from swaying. In that narrow doorway I felt two truths at once. I felt the instinct to pull her inside. Wrap her in a blanket, make tea, fix it. And I felt the echo of her own words from a year ago, clean and sharp. "I don't want to see you anymore." I breathed in the lavender cleaner and the cold air and said the only thing I could manage. "Come in," I told her. "Tell me what happened." And as she stepped over the threshold, suitcase rolling behind her like a confession, I knew the next part would hurt more than the silence ever did. She moved like someone who had been walking for hours, even if she hadn't. Her coat was too thin for the weather, and when I touched her sleeve the fabric felt cold, as if it had never been warmed by a car heater. I noticed what she didn't have: no phone, no purse, no keys. Her fingers were bare where a ring used to be. I guided her to the kitchen table. The chair creaked the way it always had. I put the kettle on, and the click sounded too loud in my quiet house. Lauren kept glancing at the front door, then the window, as if expecting someone to follow her. "Do you have your phone?" I asked. She shook her head. "He took it," she said, and her voice thinned. "Or he said it was part of the plan. I don't know. I just left." I watched her swallow hard, as if she were trying to push something down that kept rising anyway. "Mom," she said, voice small, "I think I lost everything." I poured water into 2 mugs, the old chipped one for me, a plain white one for her, and set them down carefully as if sound might break her. She wrapped both hands around the mug but didn't drink. Her knuckles went pale. On her forearm, half hidden by the sleeve, a faint purple mark bloomed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't think I'd ever have to come back." Then she took one shaking breath and began. The clock ticked above the stove steady as a metronome, while her words came out broken and precise at last. "Today." Lauren spoke in pieces at first, like someone picking glass out of her skin. She kept her eyes on the table grain, tracing the lines with her fingertip. The kettle hissed itself quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car passed, and her shoulders jumped as if the sound had a name. "It started small," she said. "Just helpful things. Ethan had offered to organize her accounts, she told me. He said it was romantic, building a future together. He set up a shared budgeting app, created new passwords, and added his email as the recovery address in case she forgot. When she hesitated, he laughed and kissed her forehead. "Do you trust me or not?" he'd said. Lauren's voice turned thin when she repeated it. She had trusted him. She had wanted to be the kind of wife who didn't keep one foot out the door. Then came the signatures. He brought papers home after work, neatly clipped, and slid them across the counter the way a waiter slides a check. She signed while pasta boiled, while a show played in the background, while he talked about their next trip. Sometimes he'd point to the line and say, "Just here." "It's boring stuff." "Like what?" I asked, still trying to keep my tone steady. Lauren swallowed. "Loans," she whispered. "Credit. Things in my name." She finally looked up, and her eyes were swollen and dry at the same time. "I didn't read them, Mom. I didn't want to seem suspicious." I reached for my phone and opened my banking app. Not hers, mine, because it was the only place I could put my hands that wouldn't shake. "How much?" I asked. She pulled a folded printout from her coat pocket, creased and damp from being gripped too long. At the top, a date stamped in black, September 18th. Below it, a list of transfers, withdrawals, and payments that looked like a slow bleeding. 45,000, she said. A little more. It happened over months. My mouth went dry. $45,000 wasn't an argument or a misunderstanding. It was intent. "There's more," she added, and her fingers tightened around the paper. "The apartment, it isn't mine. Ethan had insisted the lease be simpler, if it was under his business contact," she said. "He told her it was a smart move, better for taxes, better for flexibility. She believed him. She let him. She had even felt proud to be easy. But when she confronted him, when she finally asked to see statements, asked why collection emails were arriving, asked why her card kept declining, he changed. Lauren described it without exaggeration, which somehow made it worse. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. He went quiet, cold, and orderly. He told her she was being ungrateful. He told her her mother had poisoned her mind. He told her she was unstable and needed to calm down. Then he picked up her phone from the counter, said, "We're taking a break from distractions," and walked it into his pocket. The next morning her key didn't work. The lock had been changed. She stood outside their building with her suitcase, the one now sitting in my hallway, and realized she had no access to the accounts, no proof of ownership, no name on the lease, and no one nearby she felt safe calling. "I knocked," she said. "I texted from a neighbor's phone." He replied once. Her voice fell to a whisper. He said, "Don't embarrass yourself. Go to your mom." The sentence sat between us like smoke. I stared at Lauren's hands around the mug. They were shaking, but she held on. She had walked back to me with nothing except the truth, and the truth was heavy. I didn't ask why she hadn't listened earlier. I didn't say "I told you so." I only asked softly, "Do you have any copies? Emails? Anything?" Lauren nodded once. "I forwarded what I could before he locked me out," she said. "It's in my inbox. If I can get back in." In that moment I understood the shape of what had happened. Not a sudden mistake. A careful narrowing. A love story rewritten into a contract she never got to read. And I understood something else too. Ethan hadn't just taken her money. He had taken her confidence, and left her standing in my kitchen, learning how to breathe again. She told me about the first alert she ignored. A text from her bank at 2:14 a.m. New device signed in. Ethan had been beside her in bed, scrolling, thumb moving in the dark. He said it was a routine update. Later came small test charges, $9.99 here, $27.50 there. Then larger ones labeled wire and cash advance. Each time she asked, he had an answer ready, soothing as syrup. A lender's letter arrived with her name misspelled by one letter, like she were almost herself. She found a notebook in his desk once, a page of numbers and dates, and when she touched it he closed the drawer and said, "That's work." When she logged into her account from a friend's laptop, she saw the balance and felt her stomach drop. The last transfer had a note that read, "For us," like a joke, only he understood. Quiet. The first night Lauren slept in my guest room, she didn't really sleep. I heard her turning, the mattress springs answering in small complaints. At 3:06 a.m., she padded into the kitchen in her socks, standing under the weak stove light like a visitor. I poured warm tea into 2 mugs, the chipped one for me, the plain white one for her. She held it with both hands, staring at the steam as if it might explain how a life could vanish in one season. In the morning, the consequences arrived the way bills do, without emotion, without mercy. Her debit card had already been declined at the grocery store the day before. Now her email filled with notices. Payment failed. Account past due. Action required. She flinched at every subject line, as if each one were Ethan's voice. We started with what we could prove. Lauren used my old laptop at the kitchen table, shoulders tight, clicking through screens she barely recognized. Half her passwords had been changed. Recovery codes went to Ethan's number. The bank's automated system asked security questions she could answer. But then a final prompt appeared. Verification sent to primary device. Primary device. The phone he'd taken. I watched her swallow hard. He made himself the door, she said, and it sounded like she had just figured it out. By noon we had a short list of accounts and lenders. I didn't lecture. I didn't perform motherhood as a courtroom. I did what I've always done best. I got organized. I opened a notebook and wrote dates in my neat, careful handwriting. September 18th, the last transfer. September 19th, the lock changed. September 20th, my doorbell. Lauren sat beside me, quieter now but present. Every few minutes she whispered, "I'm so sorry," as if apology could refill a drained account. Then Ethan's life began to crack in public, not because I chased him, but because his own structure depended on control. When Lauren stopped answering, his automatic payments started failing. The same systems he'd used to bind her began pulling at him. A message popped up on one of the creditor portals. Borrower unreachable. Another. Employment verification pending. He had used Lauren's credit like a ladder, and the moment she stepped off, it wobbled. 2 days later, a mutual friend posted online about a sudden separation and asked if anyone knew where Ethan had gone. The comments filled quickly, confused, sympathetic, then sharper as people compared notes. A coworker mentioned he'd missed a meeting. Someone else said his phone went straight to voicemail. Another wrote, "He owes me money too." Lauren read the thread in silence, her thumb hovering. Then she set the phone down like it was hot. Her face didn't look triumphant. It looked tired. The next consequence was smaller but crueler. A package arrived for Lauren at Ethan's address and was returned to sender. Her name stamped in red. And no longer at this residence. She stared at the stamp for a long time, as if the ink had branded her. "I built a home on paper," she said. And he owned the paper. At the end of the week, she went with me to replace her ID, because hers had been lost during the chaos. We stood in line at the government office under fluorescent lights that made everyone look pale. Lauren kept her eyes forward, jaw clenched, and when the clerk asked, "Current address?" her voice shook. I said gently, "She's staying with me." The clerk nodded like it was ordinary. Lauren didn't. That evening when we came back, Lauren opened her suitcase and finally unpacked more than clothes. She pulled out the ring he'd given her, wrapped in a tissue. She placed it on my kitchen counter beside the fruit bowl and stared at it, breathing through her nose. "I thought love meant handing everything over," she said. "I thought that was trust." On Saturday, another shoe dropped. A travel alert hit Lauren's old email. 2 plane tickets for our anniversary had been purchased months earlier with her card. Now the airline sent a final notice. Payment reversed, reservation canceled. I pictured Ethan at an airport gate, suitcase in hand, boarding pass that wouldn't scan, his polished smile failing in front of strangers. It wasn't revenge. It was arithmetic. Later that same day, a towing company left a voicemail on my landline asking for Lauren by her full name. "We're calling about the vehicle associated with your account," the man said, bored and practiced. Lauren listened, face drained, then whispered, "He used my name for that too." We wrote it down in the notebook, another line of proof. I circled it twice in ink. Quiet. On the 8th day after Lauren arrived, I stood alone in my hallway and looked at the small pile of things she'd dropped by the door. Her suitcase, a pair of worn sneakers, a folded coat that still smelled faintly of someone else's cologne. I realized I had already stepped into an old role without thinking. Fixer. Buffer. The one who absorbs the shock so other people can stand upright. I loved my daughter. That had never changed. But I was 63, and I had finally learned the difference between helping and disappearing. That morning I made a list, the same way I always did when life got noisy. Not a list of Ethan's sins. Not a list of what Lauren should have done. A list of what I would and would not do. I would give her a safe room, warm meals, and time to breathe. I would sit with her while she gathered documents. I would drive her to appointments and stand beside her when her voice shook. But I would not hand over my life again. Not my savings. Not my peace. Not my name. I had watched my own mother do that. Bleed herself dry for family who treated her kindness like an unlimited account. I promised myself years ago I wouldn't repeat it. And still the habit of self-sacrifice tried to return the moment Lauren cried in my kitchen. So I opened my banking app and checked every automatic payment that linked to Lauren. There were 2 I'd kept quietly for just in case. Her old phone plan and a small emergency card I'd helped her build when she first moved out. Ethan had found them. He'd routed charges through anything that looked like a lifeline. I didn't panic. I didn't call Lauren in and make it dramatic. I sat at the table under the ticking clock and did the simplest, hardest thing. I shut the doors he'd tried to use. I canceled the payments. I changed my passwords. I called my bank and asked them to flag any connection to her previous shared accounts. I requested new cards. When the representative asked if I wanted to add an authorized user, for convenience, I said, clearly, no. Lauren came into the kitchen while I was writing the confirmation numbers in my notebook. "What are you doing?" she asked, voice wary. "Protecting my home," I said. "And protecting you from being used through me." Her face tightened. I'm not asking you for money. I know, I told her. But I'm also not letting him reach you through my kindness. She sat down slowly, hands folded, the way she used to sit when she was small and waiting for a consequence. The difference was I wasn't there to punish her. I was there to be honest. I will help you rebuild, I said, keeping my tone level. But we do it with boundaries. You do the work. I support. I don't carry it for you. Her eyes filled, not with the frantic tears from the porch, but with something quieter, shame maybe. Relief too. I don't know how to start, she whispered. We start with the truth, I said. On paper. That afternoon we printed everything she had forwarded. Bank alerts, lender emails, the lease messages, the travel receipt, the returned package stamped in red. We put them in a folder. We made copies. We wrote dates. We treated it like weather damage. Not a moral failure, but a mess that needed a method. Then I did one more thing for myself. I called a lawyer I trusted, an older woman with a steady voice, and scheduled a simple appointment. Not to go after Ethan. Not to chase drama. To update my own documents. To ensure no one could ever sign for me, speak for me, or access what I had built without my consent. When I hung up, my hands were steady. Lauren watched me and said softly, "You're still my mom." I am, I answered. And I'm also a person who deserves peace. That night I lit a small lavender candle by the sink. The same scent as my cleaner, the same calm. I listened to the house settle, wood creaking in its familiar way, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not victory. Clarity. The next morning I handed Lauren's sheet of paper with 3 columns. What happened, what we can prove, and what we do next. It wasn't punishment. It was a handrail. She stared at it, then nodded. Okay, she said, voice small but steady, and began to write. Her pen hesitated, then moved with purpose. Before lunch she asked, "Can I stay here for a while?" You can, I told her. But we name what a while means. You'll rebuild in your own name. You'll work even if it's temporary. And you won't let Ethan into this house. No talks, no apologies, no closure. She flinched, then whispered, I won't. Saying it out loud felt strange, drawing lines with my own child. But the lines weren't walls. They were boundaries that kept my love from becoming a doorway for someone else's greed. That night I set my keys in the dish by the door and felt their weight, familiar and earned. For the first time in a year my home felt like mine again, and I could breathe inside it, in peace at last. A month passed, then another. The house learned new rhythms. Lauren found temporary work and left early each morning, hair still damp, lunch packed in a paper bag. She paid for her own bus pass. She saved every receipt in a folder of her own. In the evenings we cooked simple meals and spoke about ordinary things, weather, neighbors, the price of apples. The drama stayed outside where it belonged. Some nights she cried quietly in her room. I didn't rush in. I left the hallway light on. She knew where I was. I began volunteering twice a week at the library again, reshelving books and reading aloud to children who smelled of soap and crayons. I joined a walking group that met at the park at dawn. I bought myself a new scarf in a color I'd never worn before. These were small choices, but they stitched me back into myself. Lauren noticed. One evening she said, "You look lighter." I smiled. "So do you." She rebuilt slowly, carefully, in her own name. When a bill arrived, she opened it. When a form asked for a signature, she read every line. She learned to say, "I need time." The word "we" loosened its grip, and I returned, tentative but alive. Ethan did not come back. He sent one email, short, tidy, asking to talk things through. Lauren deleted it. She didn't ask me what to do. She decided. Watching that was enough. On a quiet Sunday, we sat at the kitchen table with tea. The lavender candle burned low. Lauren reached across and touched my hand. "I'm sorry I erased you," she said. "I thought growing up meant cutting you off." I squeezed her fingers once. "Growing up means choosing yourself without destroying the people who love you," I said. "We're both learning. Life didn't reset. It continued, honest and imperfect. But it moved forward. Here is what I know now. A mother's love is not control. It is not silence. And it is not self-destruction. It is the courage to be present, and the wisdom to stand whole. Thank you for listening to my story. If this touched a nerve, you belong here. Subscribe to hear truths where silence becomes strength. And remember this: love should never cost you your name.